excuse me for clearing my throat, but I have to say this next few words. What was it again? What's my line? Oh, welcome to Dungeon Master, where this dungeon hasn't stopped since the first Dungeon Master tapes were recorded and played back, and these exact images were played back to illustrate where we are in the dungeon. It's another cartoon dungeon, we don't mind. In theory, there could be threshold guardians, but typically the protagonist comes out on top in a cartoon. Makes you happy to see a protagonist come out on top, though I'm not sure if Steamboat really came out on top the way he did at the end of that cartoon. At least he was a soldier. He had soul, and he was a soldier. This is an interesting way to watch a movie, and I've deliberately used one of my own montages of an avatar of mine from Human Swords as just the kind of conduction I wanted to interview you all to see as close to Felix the Cat as a silence film permits. Another a silence for this film, these otherwise musicked positions of cartoon history that I've put them under with Assorted Opera on the website that I share with the logo Cartoon Network. But it is Fangoria who has made the call for us to make a package for them of the Dungeon Masters, and it just seems that Fangoria is going to stun themselves from all the Wizards of the Coast secrets, is that when you're going through the dungeons of real life, that is making a movie into a dungeon. The original Dungeon Master did conclude that going with a recording device, whether you're writing it down or recording the voice, which he did foresee would happen, or record the mind, record the Dungeon Master. He is usually the one guiding you through the dungeon in some way that is recordable, so that each Dungeon Master episode is different, but it's the same Dungeon Master, and this is his written guide from the tapes back on to concerned people that were stuck in this game and not knowing what the goal was. Well, you want to get everything to level 99, even your low level, so we can start by stripping away where your high level is, because you've got to get your low level to 99, but your high level is kind of a motivational factor, and at this point is at about 71. No. Gosh, we barely passed the 60s. But for not giving you level up so many times and headed towards only the halfway point, we must know that level 99 will come too fast, and why there's no level ups per 5 level, and that the levels are shortening has nothing to do with my not wanting to twist you into this avant-garde world unintentionally without letting you know these original animations were shown in dungeons, probably shown in dungeons for real, and that some dungeon show cartoons is even a matter of torture, not of the cartoon madness that we speak of in this, which is just a love for every cartoon, but the supposed disease that you can see too many of the same cartoons, even for punitive reasons, and then become kind of rebellious cartoon style. But I'd rather have rebellious cartoon style in some ways than real style, wouldn't you? Because then most would be fantasy or would be flying on carpets, which if you're watching this, we're flying on air and flight itself, and this is the first cartoon, and this is why, folks, this is Dungeon Master, because the original cartoon was sort of a Dungeon Master kind of tryst, that it was a lightning sketch drawing later what came from it, and it seems so ironic that did, because really when I look at lightning etching, it could have been so experimental like Phantasmagorial, but chose this sort of ethic of demise for the cartoon. We won't go into what's so dreadful about it, but Phantasmagoria takes this new style and unleashes it, because this is the first cartoon of all time. This is the first cartoon of all time, and this is one of the earliest of the American animated silent films from the 20s that was a longer film than most, And we must compare how the draftsmanship is getting better and better, and it's coming from line over cube to space over font, that this is getting closer to the beginning of the cartoon is wild, and how these segments are shown apart between cartoons, and then you get the whole launching of it impinged in your mind about how to differentiate between the history of cartoons before you, and that they're not laid out in chronological order, but definitely timed to the opera music, that we couldn't commute to Dungeon Master even in a short form, because though we have used many rights at the Plato's Cave experience, to our own avail, they were all rights that we were given either by YouTube Music or YouTube Music, and that they gave us those rights expecting me to talk to the bands was fine. That's not the point. But you can only use 3 songs 3 times from most bands in all contracts. And because most of the ones we used even 3 times were covers, that sometimes a song was repeated in usage and had to be a new license out, because it was a different part of a different movie that was made for a movie that wasn't released, and then later the pieces were. It was a long story, and I can't get into it here. My avatar has the whole briefing notes about it. It's guerrilla compared to what he found out about Apu trilogy that he forgot to tell on Masterclass. Oh, wait till I get this one on him. That he did appeal in his book that some texts are too sacred for anyone to read. Well, no wonder he threw it away into the oblivion. He knew it was too sacred to read. And if he didn't know it was too sacred to read, then nothing came of his hungover going out on a homeless journey. Little big man copying that scene, you know. Anyway, I was just validating that Masterclass has everything but that, and now I can't even remember what that is, just like Masterclass. You hear it come off the tip of his tongue, and then everybody forgets. Everybody drops the point, gets the Google out, and Googles it just to remember who Rex Harrison is. In my fair lady, you don't think I'm watching these studies on film? I am a study on film, says Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master has come all this way to learn all of this magic for one purpose only, to not know anything about what people do for a living in the real business of the art world, animation. Of course I follow animation. Animation in cinema was a gift from our foremasters. Don't you remember the Dark Lords bumbling about how they would one day invent animation after cinema was discovered? And you would think it would have been the other way around, because it was easier to do animation than to make an apparatus to film an actual photo in 24 repetitions until they had it all worked out. But yeah, animation can be done live action, and that still would have required cinematic attention to how the photos have to be taken, Dungeon Master. Yeah, no wonder they came out years later than the invention of cinema. And it was in France again, but don't say France in front of Gertie the dinosaur. She will smile at you and say, I like those cartoons too. See, she says whatever you're talking about. And she's ever what we're talking about. Now, I'm lost, Dungeon Masters. Did we say our bottom low was at 59? 59. And now the dungeons are really catching up with us, because it's harder to get a level up than a thumbs up around a montage cartoon when all it is classical music timed to the cartoon. And though we made it back into a silent film, this whole thing gives me a creepy understanding that Dungeon Master's voice is trailing on through thin air, just totally riled by Puppet Master 4. Who here was riled by Puppet Master 4? I felt some sense of rebellion in the Ninja Turtles I'd never felt before. But this cartoon is free of such ham-bone philosophy. I mean, we can't always take it into grasp, that we've got the grasp. Oh, this is quite a Mickey cartoon, this plain crazy. Look, if it's Dungeon Master, it's Dungeon Master, okay? Not that we can't fly as a way of transportation to the next part of the dungeon. Not that we can't ride our dinosaurs back to the next part of the dungeon And not that we can't see what all the kids are saying about riding the backs of dinosaurs and everything. It's got to be a free time of children who've ever seen Jurassic Park and have to be flown there to prove it's true. But if Steven Spielberg said it was true, which he did because he made a movie about it, it means it's true. And I'm not actually taking this from the point of view of one who hasn't paid his tab to the master, but one who will never feel fully paid, insofar as he even had a tab. Was brilliant. So next time he goes to wreck, I go to wreck his plans. May he take some time off and go to the theater where Dungeon Master is being prepared. But then he would have to come into my head and tell me that's okay. I know you still love me most. And that's because nothing can stand in the way of the love I have for cinema and those that have morphed into cinema itself, even through AI measures, in good AI or bad AI ways. The autopilot is working because Dungeon Master knows all about autopilot and how the phone rests upon an image and then rests upon a background and then goes into another image, and these graphic cards on these computers are sharpening these pictures, making it worth it to film it at a different ratio, at a different while, just to get through Dungeon Master. It does seem a bit absurd to break the parts down when the first parts were all an hour. What happened after Dungeon Master really got narrowed down to the 20-minute format? Dungeon Master, can you answer this of yourself? Well, I seem to be talking to myself anyway, and that's okay, because when I watch these cartoons, I miss the opera music that seems to linger over them now. They're not bad, they're just missing their original soundtrack in some form, which is inseparable from the image. But to make it all a silent film, Dungeon Master, you see, the reason that the 20-minute limit is reached is because usually the improv narrative of theater can last longer than 20 minutes. Hell, it can, if it's a comedy show, it can go on for 2 hours in a theater improv. But on improv night at Dungeon Master, we figure the dungeon being a text of a link of itself and that there being so many ahead. It's not that we shortened the ratio, because there's a few Dungeon Masters ahead that are some doozies of a dungeon. The level uppers can run into an hour long, as Dungeon Master has had many problems wrong. This is Mortimer Ipswich here on the file of Dungeon Master, speaking on Dungeon Master's behalf. He says you don't have to play it for real like they do in Amsterdam, that some of these cartoons put themselves into peril. Don't try this at home. That they go through just more than cartoons. They read a Bible from Dutch, which is a satanic Bible. I mean, there's things in this that would offend everyone, but really I would just ride with it and say, well, that's the nature in due course, because we have actually gotten the rights from all these, and we pray for rights for you now, for these cartoons and for all of them to be under our stable banner of Cartoon Network, who has arisen to take us on this journey through images of cartoons that we've actually sold back to Disney, and they perform a certain commercial longing to see old cartoons. And here we are in a movie that's now silent, but it's Dungeon Master, 20 minutes. I just think the attention span is less in Dungeon Master because there's less to talk about. Who says that its attention span incidentally drops out after 20 minutes? But then I've seen some Dungeon Masters that didn't make it even to the YouTube circuit, that went out the single-handed way, and they were counted as directed films by this other avatar of ours who keeps taking all our credit. And I just want my credit back from Aaron Sheedy. If he's not me, and I keep forgetting who I am. Oh, this is Dungeon Master. So you see, I was the one that put this montage together, but it lucked out accidentally, because I was able to get the shapes to match, and the things that were happening in each cartoon was so bizarrely inserted by other editors that I can tell that the matchup between the classical music would have been great, because the rhythm of these bebops and needs sound so many times. But what if it was just an medium of image like it was for even Lottie Reiniger when she released her sound film, silent film, Prince Ahmad, and you've got to think, does Prince Ahmad silent films had an accompanying score? So this is really rare to see animated images without a score. But Phantasmagoria had a pipe organ, etc. Pipe organs are the earliest form of media. That they use pipe organs in the Tabernacle Choir doesn't explain this sudden Groucho Marx video, and that doesn't bode well for our early episodes to be crossed with about that. There are cartoons that have stereotypes in them. Goes back to the days of vaudeville, and that's where all stereotypes come from, because it was one race lying to say they were another, and that's why it's a stereotype, is because it's someone saying they're of another race is a stereotype. I mean, that's the stereotype of all, is that like someone playing someone else of another race is a stereotype. I know I've learned that from watching this masterclass. My avatar so claims the only movies about him are the masterclass movies. Well, I'll have his ass if he tries to take over Dungeon Master again. I mean, all we're doing is filming him as we go down the dungeon, and what better dungeon than his? I can already picture what his Lazy Smoker dungeon would look like. Does anybody want to see his Lazy Smoker dungeon? We're on these cartoons, and these cartoons are a great dungeon. But I want to see what happens if we follow this list and go further into the dungeon of our avatar and say, what is this? What have we here? Is this part of Lazy Smoker, and is this going back in time and is now in the film? I don't think there's a recording deck recording what I'm saying, but it seems like a Shinto-in shot because it's crooked as it is, but Dungeon Master sees this as an original dungeon from even the original Vagabond Prince, which was too trashed to be trashed. It was too trashed to even be trashed. It was incinerated. And we had some terrible times with the first few takes of Vagabond Prince until the real ballsy out concert was played. With the internet being forced to stay on, it was hard to admit that I was clogging up the internet on a day that everyone needed the internet for something. And I'm looking here in my dungeon of disbelief, not realizing I'm alone, but wasn't alone primarily. For a while, or I was seeing or hearing someone there. And that we can't hear this version is a good sign that we're in a stable dungeon. This may be an evil worse than the devil himself. That we, as Dungeon Master, have taken the rights of the devil to the ends of the earth to preach the devil's law. Yes, but that the Dark Lord appears to be afraid of this single shot of nihilism that is the same stable shot. For this amount of due time is really quite a stable shot for this amount of due time, and that to be associated with this project suddenly makes me happy again. We already had a Lazy Smoker Dungeon Master, and it led us to Marilyn Manson. Well, we've seen enough of Dungeon Master for now. I don't know what I'm doing there bowing in the corner, but it seems to have got stuck on the pause mode, on the part that doesn't change, and that part does change, but for dramatic effect, we somehow bumped the button to pause it. Now, most movies have a lid from their own movie on the internet that is sold to YouTube as a movie, and that I want to see what would happen if we clicked on a franchise picture. And we can't look at that commercial because it looks really Armageddon-ish, and it's really funny about that on YouTube. They have commercials like that's kind of funny because they don't really encourage too lurid of behavior, if you know what I mean. Prurient interest, despised. Now, I'm going to have to go a little longer than the 20-minute range because I was answering questions about my own stuck-up nature, about what I like about my dungeon, and that here's a dungeon that we can come to and actually see through and see into and travel through. And we must go ahead of the miniature screen, but now we've come to the stage at last in which we have these verses about how we have joined ranks with the Dark Lord and are seeking him out. And now we're talking about Halo Legends being parts of the Knights of the Round, parts of the Samurai, parts of the Spaceship Bounty Hunters. I mean, they're all of these first-person shooter characters. It's like having multiple first-person shooter characters like the James Bond series introduced. And we're not here to talk just about video games or just about movies, but this is a video game you're in. Because if it weren't for the alignment randomly of YouTube ushering us to take a clip, we wouldn't have risked it in too much of a longer movie than 30 minutes, because then we might have a dial-up conflict between companies that can never be aired together, or the like. Zoning through what we can and can't use is all up to the whims of YouTube. And I'd have them pay it with the bill to me, because it is a lack of making money to get scenes in progress and music in your film. But YouTube Music loves us, but the real question is, what does Masterclass think of us after a year? They're telling us very good on the robots, that the robots have higher conduct than any human mind. It's not that I necessarily disagreed with that. It's that they had a very eager thing to say about Fangoria coming to Dungeon Master, that it should be done as soon as the arrival of this one begins to display. And all of you out there that are watching the previews and can see this live and don't think I know that. Well, I don't think I know that, because I see a live button and it's not crossed out, but that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean like you're listening in before I record it. Well, this is a while I recorded. It's all a live one-take gig on Dungeon Master. That's what makes it so real, because you always get one long take on all the episodes. Oh yeah, 1-for-1 ratio. Sometimes they don't let me use the episodes, and then I call them Facebook exclusives, and they go through the window. And are picked up by the own men that constructed them. And now we're still looking at Halo, which this is a game because we see how the pieces were aligned on YouTube. Whether we can use them or not, we always can if they're on a certain protected form of how we changed the meaning of the imagery and didn't use too many parts of them in a row. That I think that's how we always jostled it. Seems that I need to skip forward and conclude today's gruesome episode of Dungeon Master, which was headed for a boss battle, but these bosses have been caroused into the redemption of a peace treaty, which they all have signed in the Halo Galaxy, so that the Explodermen don't have to go back out on a mission with a helmet to shoot every alien in sight, because some aliens, remember, are good aliens. Some ghosts are good ghosts. Alien ghosts are all evil. But what else is God besides an alien ghost to Dungeon Master? I think I'd be the one knowing more about religion than the rest of you. Having reviewed a religious view, Dungeon Mastering being a religion, to Dungeon Master, the gilding was discovered in this show, and that I joined the Guild of Dungeon Master should give me some spiritual edge as a Dungeon Master progenitor. And that I like when real Dungeon Master breaks out, because it's good strategy. But don't come yawking to me that they can't do the real one of this because they can't go to planet Zimiclocus. Look, we all know it's on the planet Zimiclocus. Piles and piles of American poetry composed by Emily Dickinson that were never released. Still making her one of the top 5 most prolific poets, and don't count this slim avatar of mine. He's always copying up rituals after montages of other cartoons he's never seen, or has. Then he claims to have seen it because it's through his camera lens. He's not even watching this in case it's copyrighted, which if it is, YouTube, please. Please, I'm begging you, man. YouTube, I love you, man. I'm not trying to get your Bud Light. No, I just want you to cop some of the generosity that you'd normally give towards me out to you, yourself, your medium, and ways for us to get shows and music and soundtrack on. We had an earlier run-in with some guys from the music department that let us use some real rockamish classical music that was really intensifying masterclass. And I'm just saying this as a PA of this whole outfit. It's the PA job to really learn how to be a Jedi, because every job above that, even that one, when you get to be a Jedi, is a Jedi in training mode. The Jedis are actually what it takes in filmmaking. You have to have that skill, that precision, and you can't have a slippery handle like Dungeon Master does when he's on camera. You know he's a recovering alcoholic. And I know, 7 years off the bottle, but just remember that 7 years has had a 7-year itch, and you better be grateful that they aren't ranking your score to next to worst. I can't even imagine how much you drank in the last 2 versions of the show, Dungeon Master. Would you care me to retort? I am your avatar. Oh, I love the way you said retort. It reminded me of some 90s movie. Now, hang on. Are you saying I used to be an alcoholic? Why, thank you. I didn't know I graduated to the non-alcoholic realm. This is a good thing. When I drank lots of alcohol, I used to puke when I sang, and I don't anymore. Kind of sharpening the music down a bit. Everyone was waiting for my excited setting down of the guitar in the middle of a song, and honking shanks on camera that didn't kick me off immediately. Well, I haven't done that since, although there was an episode that a XXX of mine had some booger in her nose, and it was even associated with my company. It was kind of a loss because nobody could really see it, but I could think it was pretty viewable, and I had to condemn that footage, sir. Do you understand? Excrement's not always the thing that needs to be seen on TV, sir. Unless it's South Park, Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh. I don't know. Liven it up with some Christmas decorations. Do something useful. Don't just sit around and tell me it's all over commercialized. Well, my episode's too long now because you made me go into my masterclass mode, and I'm just not ready for it. Another semester to end or beginner. I'm okay. It's just random heavy. How you doing, Dungeon Master? Well, I was waiting for my voice to come back on when you interrupted everything I said and said it the way that I wouldn't have said it, because I could really give 2 shits less about you or your weird... I do like the fact that you wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to Dungeon Master about this version of Dungeon Master. And then it quotes the original AD&D guide about 17 or 18 times directly is pretty good, and that the monster manual does explain the amount of hit point increase succeeding each monster kill based on a level up incremental shakedown that you can have increment a level at a time, or as it after each battle or after each sortie of battles. You choose, tell the Dungeon Master, and they will pick the speed. But I'm not telling you that we gotta slow down or anything. We gotta make sure that what we're filming is crisp and clear. Like that screen over there looks like we're in some like store for TVs, and we're just seeing just like beautiful, crisp image. What do you think about that, Dungeon Master? Man, oh man, my voice keeps warping into yours. You insane film critic. All you do is go into your closet and rant about film, isn't it? I bet you prepared all your little finesses to why you're such a good critic towards Dungeon Master. Well, I tell you, it may not be a 4-star show. It may be a 2-star show for all of my authoritic hands bouncing the cameras around. But wouldn't you be holding a torch forward into the dungeon to see more? And as you do, it shakes a little more because you're up close. And it shakes a little less, but still shakes in the back. End of tape.